All right, friends, so I sat down and went through the tape from Thursday night's preseason game. And honestly, today's practice looked like nothing on the surface. Walkthrough, no pads, barely an hour. But when I dug into what actually happened on that field Thursday, there's a problem sitting on this roster right now that I don't think Steelers fans are going to be happy to hear about. And it's not small. It's something that could actually affect how this team lines up when the games start counting. So stick with me, because later in this video, I'm also going to tell you about a contract move the Steelers made this week and how I think it's going to play out for this team down the road. Hello, Steelers fans. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. All right, so let me start with what actually bothered me most on that tape, and that's the offensive line. I went through it play by play, and across the board, guys, it wasn't clean, it wasn't sharp. And I know it's preseason, I know guys aren't fully into it yet, but when I watched Troy Fautanu on Thursday night, honestly, it was rough. It wasn't every single snap where he got beat, I want to be fair here, but there was enough bad tape that I can't just wave it off as one bad rep. This is a guy I expected to walk into camp and just lock down a starting job. And after what I saw, I'm not saying panic, but I am saying I noticed it and you should notice it too. Now, on the flip side, McCormick and Frazier, I thought those two actually held up fine. Nothing that jumped out at me in a bad way. So it's not like the whole line was a disaster, but when your left tackle spot is the one getting exposed, that's the spot that usually costs you the most. And that kind of leads me right into the next thing I want to get into, because if Fautanu was the guy who surprised me in a bad way, the right guard spot is the one that's had me concerned for a while now, even before Thursday. I've said this before on this channel. Spencer Anderson, I just don't think he's a starting caliber right guard in this league. I don't think he is. Brock Hoffman, look, he's had some decent moments in practice reps, but I'm still not sold either way on him. So right now, if you ask me who the weak link on this offensive line is, I'm pointing right at that right guard position, and nobody's really stepped up to claim it yet. And then there's Dylan Cook, and this one honestly worries me the most out of everybody. He played some good football last year, I'm not taking that away from him, but Thursday, he did not look like a starting right tackle out there. He didn't. And I keep going back and forth on this because part of me wonders, was Cook actually that good last year, or were we just so used to bad tackle play before him that when we saw somebody who looked competent, we jumped to calling him really good? Because when you actually stack him up against other tackles around the league, that's where you start to see the gap. And on Thursday, that gap showed up. Which brings me to the guy who might actually be the fix for all of this, and that's Max Iheanachor. If he's not clearly better than what Cook put on tape, then this team's got a real issue at that spot heading into the season. I'll be honest with you, I think if this had been a real regular season game and not preseason, Iheanachor probably plays. I really do. But there's no reason to rush him back right now, not in game 1 of the preseason. Let him get all the way right, and then we find out what this line actually looks like when everybody's healthy and everybody's available. Until then, I'm not making any final judgments, but I'm also not going to sit here and pretend what I saw Thursday was fine, because it wasn't. Now, switching over to the backfield, because there's another situation developing here that I think is flying a little under the radar, and that's Kaleb Johnson. I've been saying all offseason, this guy's path to making this roster runs through special teams. That was always going to be the way in for him. Show something on punt coverage, show something on kickoff, get down there and make a tackle, show the coaching staff you're willing to do the dirty work. And he just hasn't done it. He hasn't been out there doing it. And then Thursday night comes around, he gets in the game once Allar's already in there, and he gets 2 carries. 2. Behind an offensive line full of guys who probably aren't making this roster themselves. That's usually a pretty clear signal, guys, when a team gives a player like that. That's the kind of usage you give somebody when you're not counting on them long term. Now, here's where I'll be honest with you, because I think how he got handled last year matters in this conversation too. He made a rookie mistake on a kickoff return, and instead of putting him right back out there the next opportunity to let him learn from it, they sat him down, and he never really got back out of that doghouse. And look, you can say that mistake cost the team a game. Fine, I'm not going to argue that too hard. But how's a young player supposed to develop if you don't let him play through it? That whole situation just never got fixed, and now here we are. So, where does things stand? I genuinely wouldn't be shocked if Kaleb Johnson isn't on this roster once the first round of cuts comes. Now, could he go light it up in practice this week and change the story? Sure, that's possible, and I actually hope he does, because I want to see the guy succeed. But based on what I've watched so far, I don't see a clear path for him right now on this team, and that's just where things stand.
All right, shifting over to the injury front because there's a handful of things we're tracking here too. DK and Pittman Jr. were both still not practicing today, so that's something to keep an eye on as camp winds down. Brandon Smith picked up an injury as well, don't have full details on the severity of it yet, and Kaden Wetjen was also out of practice today. I liked what I saw out of Brandon Smith when he was actually out there earlier in camp, so hopefully that one's not anything long-term. On a more positive note, Jalen Ramsey continues progressing, still ramping up, doing more each day. And honestly, if you needed him to suit up and play a real game today, I think he'd be ready to go. But there's no reason to rush a guy like that through a bunch of preseason snaps when you can just let him build all the way back up naturally. Smart move either way. Now, as far as who's actually stood out through this stretch, when I think about who impressed me the most, it's Allar, Howard, and Wetjen. Those three have consistently shown up in a good way. And I want to make sure I mention Gabe Rubio here too, because I don't think enough people caught this. He had 6 tackles in that game. Now that's not 6 solo stops, but for a defensive lineman to be involved in 6 tackles, that's real production, and it tells me this guy's genuinely making a push for a spot on this roster. Keep that name in mind going forward. Now, let me circle back to something that dropped before all of this practice stuff even happened, because it's honestly the biggest news of the last couple days, and that's Keanu Benton getting his extension. 4 years, $72 million. And I'll tell you straight up, I was in the camp that wanted this deal to get done. I know there were fans split on it. Some wanted to just let him play it out, draft another guy down the line instead. But honestly, that's not how it works. Finding a real interior pass rusher like this, that's not something that just falls into your lap in a draft class whenever you feel like it. If it were that easy, teams wouldn't be handing out big money to guys who honestly aren't even as good as Benton is. Now, has he had struggles in the run game? Sure, especially lined up at nose tackle, which honestly was never his ideal spot to begin with. But you move him around, you put him in positions where he can actually use his skill set, and I think this turns into a real breakout type season for him. I don't even know if he ends up the full-time starter right away, but he's going to be in that rotation, and depending how much longer Cameron Hayward keeps playing, Benton's role is only going to keep growing from here. And I'll say this too, this isn't the only deal this front office has gotten done. They locked up Nick Herbig, they took care of Darnell Washington, and now Benton. This team is showing they're willing to invest in their own guys, and I think that matters, especially when you're not out there paying a quarterback right now. That's a real advantage, being able to put that cap space into building up the rest of the roster instead. So, with camp continuing to roll on, they're going to keep grinding through practices before breaking camp on the 17th, which is coming up fast. And the next preseason game is Friday, so we're not far off from getting another real look at this team, especially that offensive line, to see if anything actually changes from what we saw Thursday. So that's where things stand right now. Offensive line's got real questions to answer. Kaleb Johnson's spot is looking shaky heading into cuts, and Benton's extension is looking like a smart, long-term move for this front office. Plenty still developing here, and I'll keep bringing you the updates as camp winds down. Appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.